मानस भजरे गुरुचरणम् दुस्तर भवसागरतरणम् मानस भजरे गुरुचरणम् दुस्तर भवसागरतरणम्.
With much love and reverence, I offer myself at the lotus feet of beloved Bhagwan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Sai Ram to all of you. Honestly, we're all a bunch of, it is my firm conviction that we're all a bunch of zeros. But when we stand next to one, we acquire so much value. And it's not an ordinary one. It is the one without a second. It is the one from which everything and everyone has arisen. It is the one that is the source of all creation and the one into which everything dissolves eventually. So to have that honor, to stand in that long row of zeros besides this one is what lends beauty to your life and mine. And for my own privilege, I'm so grateful to Swami. So my journey to Bhagwan began in my childhood. I was very young, under 6 years of age for sure. And I lived in New Delhi, where my father was a bureaucrat, and we lived in a government house, which I saw about 5 days ago. I drove past it in a place called Andrews Ganj in South Delhi. And it was, I have always had that intense desire as a child. I was born with it, I guess, to have an instant connect with God. I wanted to have my live wire real connection with God. And one day we were at home in the evening and the great Indian monsoon hit the Indian capital of Delhi and it was pouring outside. So I wanted to know, where is the rain coming from? I guess I asked my mother and she said, Bhagwanji. So I went out in the balcony. I peeped out my little head and I shouted into the big dark void and I said, Bhagwanji, barish ko rokiye. The moment I said that, I didn't know to who. It was like somebody up there switched off the shower head. And the rain just stopped. And I knew that somebody listens and there is somebody out there. And I remember shortly after that, my father got transferred to Srinagar in the valley of Kashmir, from where we come. That is our hometown. And when we were in Kashmir, we had a great life for a middle-class Indian family. For example, I had a dog. Anybody who grew up with a dog will know how nice it is to have a pet at home. I had a big swing in my backyard. I had a bicycle. And I had many such privileges. My father was in charge of a particular project which allowed us to ski freely all winter. So much fun in a place called Gulmarg. It's a hill station outside of Srinagar. It's known as the Switzerland of India. So great childhood, great school, but through it all, I always had a nagging feeling something was lacking. Something was amiss. Nothing felt complete. The only time I felt very, very happy was when on weekends, my cousin brothers, and my sisters and I, and a couple of our helpers, we would all trek up a mountain near our house. First, we would walk about 4 or 5 kilometers to the base of the mountain and then climb. The hill is called Shankaracharya. So we would climb this temple hill of Shankaracharya and there early in the morning worship a huge ancient Shivalingam. And every time I went to the Shivalingam with this beautiful incense wafting, mantras being chanted, and Kashmir is full of beautiful flowers. The lingam was decorated with lotuses and roses and dahlias, and I would just lose my mind and embrace this lingam and feel absolutely complete, happy, and blissed out. I felt I was alive and everything was perfect. Then we would come out and eat our sandwiches, fight with each other, come down the hill, walk home. I would complain of pain in my legs. I was little. And we did this throughout our childhood. Kashmir is also home, the Valley of Kashmir is also home to many sacred shrines, which my family and I visited. And we also had a number of Sufi saints who lived there and Hindu rishis who we didn't go looking for them. Somehow they started coming to our home. And my mother would be very respectful and reverential towards them. Many of them have blessed me in my childhood and everybody in the family, not only me, everyone. So we had very good divine company. And around the same time, my father's boss in Delhi called to say that his sister-in-law from Bangalore, a lady named Dr. Sushila, wanted to come and see the beautiful valley of Kashmir. So we invited her to stay as a guest in our house. We had a nice guest house, a guest suite. So she stayed in our home, and by this time, my oldest sister, we were very little. Maybe my sister was in 9th standard at that time, grade 9. She had a friend in a school called Central School or Kendri Vidyalaya. That girl, we are 4 girls in our family, and my mother would not let us go and have any sleepovers or any hangout with any friends except this girl's house, because they were also 4 girls, safe environment. Sushma, her name was. So Sushma told us that when they had gone to Bangalore, they had met God. And God was Satya Sai Baba, and he's an incarnation of Rama and Krishna. Strangely, my parents were so devout that intuitively we believed everything she said. We didn't know anything else. She gave us a picture and the aarti. We already had a Hindu altar. We placed Swami there, Swami's image, and we started singing this Telugu aarti all wrong in our own Kashmiri way. Mangalarati Anduku Mandaraginda. We didn't know what we were saying, but we chanted. So this doctor came, lady, and she was very amused to see this Kashmiri family singing Telugu Aarti and worshipping someone she knew of because she was from Bangalore, but she didn't believe in him. So she found us very entertaining, I guess, but she was respectful of the hospitality we offered her, all the touring around. Everywhere we took her to, and see, my parents were very secular. So there's a beautiful mosque in Kashmir. It's called Hazrat Bal. So we even took her to Hazrat Bal. We took her to the chapel in the convent where I studied. We took her to all the Hindu shrines. For us, by nature, we were Sarvadharma. So we were very cool with that. So when she went back, she wanted to send a thank you package to my mom and dad. So, one nice silk sari from Bangalore. And also she went to Whitefield. She bought Vibhuti, she bought the book Man of Miracles, and she parceled it over to us. That is the first time we read the book. Many people tell their story. They came to Swami because they read Howard Murford's book. My family came to Swami because Swami chose us. Ishavasya Upanishad says the self will determine when it wants to reveal itself to anyone. So even with regards to Prema Sai Baba, as anxious as I get to find him, I know he will find us, each one of us, when our time comes. Wherever he is, yet to be born, don't know where to be born, don't go to YouTube. There are 500 of them. So, and let yourself find, not YouTube. Okay. So I'm actually surprised AI has not created one yet. Don't prompt it on chat, okay? So fast forward to us leaving Kashmir and going to Delhi, and my father had a major crisis at his workplace all of a sudden, and all the plans we had for the family kind of came to a standstill. So we stuck to Swami and prayed and prayed and prayed, and overnight a miracle happened and everything got sorted in my dad's office, and we moved to Singapore where I lived. My parents lived for 6 years. And in Singapore, I attended high school, but in Serangoon Road, there was a Kalyan Mandapam where every weekend, Thursday evening, we had a lot of Sai activities, and we started going to an organized Sai movement. And from there, we came to know about Anantapur College, and I was very blessed to study 6 years in Swami's, at Swami's Lotus Feet. I completed my bachelor's, my master's, as also a year of research. Now, when I finished my master's, when we were talking earlier to the ladies section, a lot of people have this doubt, how do you know if your decision is right or wrong? Is it my ego self thinking? Is it me thinking? So for me, the whole crux was, how do I continue to stay close to Swami? And I didn't want to go home because I knew my mom's, the first thing on her agenda was marriage. So she would start saying, okay, you finished? Now I'm going to invite horoscopes and look for a boy for you. So when I was finishing my bachelor's, my sister and I and a handful of graduating class got an interview with Swami. And in that interview, Swami told us many nice things and good advices. But when we were sitting right at his lotus feet, my sister and I. And one time I just went like raise my hand and Swami said, Kya? I said, Swami, I have a question. Then Swami said, what is the question? So now I didn't want to, I had a personal dilemma, you see. I didn't want to tell the whole room there what my problem was. So I kind of knelt up on my knees and Swami leaned forward and his big hair was caressing my face and he said, "Ha ma, kya baat hai?" So I thought if I speak English or Hindi, everybody is going to understand. I decided, he said there's only one language of the heart, let's test him. I started speaking in Kashmiri, which is my mother tongue. And I told him my problem that I'm very scared to go home because the moment I step into the house, my mom will be on with her stories about, you have to get married, you have to get settled. Swami, what should I do? And I started crying. And Swami made light of the situation. After I finished this long rant in Kashmiri, he pulled back. He said, "Hey, pagal, kaun si bhasha bolta hai? Pashto?" So he called me crazy and he said, "What language are you speaking? Is it Pashto or Persian? Because Kashmiri and Persian sound very similar, but lots." So he asked us, and then I started crying. My time. I was the drama queen. I started weeping. So my sister said, "Swami," my sister was so heartbroken for me. She said, "Swami, you know every language. You only say there is only one language of the heart." He said, "Haan, malum hai." Then he calmed me down and he gave me a very simple advice. He said, "You go home and you only pray. Everything will be fine." So my sister and I, we took a train to Delhi. We took a flight to Srinagar. In Srinagar, I prayed like I was looking for salvation. I was there for 15 days. I went to Lakshmanju's ashram. I went to Shankaracharya, Kheer Bhavani, every temple, Hazrat Bal. I prayed in the mosque, in the temple, in the church. No place I left. And I prayed. And somehow, before my mom could gather her wits, I was on the flight back to Delhi with my dad, who dropped me on the train to take to Bangalore. It was a very long trek those days. So I escaped and I got 2 more years and I finished my master's. I did my master's only because I wanted to stay with Swami. I told you, no academic goals, no 5-year life plans, 10-year life plans, planless life. So now master's finished. So I thought, the only way to continue being with Swami is to do your PhD. And hey, where's my timer? I want to make sure I don't over. So I knew that, oh, okay. Wow. I have a feeling like yesterday I'm being shortchanged. You started when I was just walking up the stairs. That happened yesterday. So you guys owe me 2 minutes from yesterday and 2 from today. And so I decided I'll do a PhD. But I wanted to do a research on a topic that really spoke to my heart, not just anything. So I picked my favorite Danish existential philosopher because I was going through so much of angst. You're 18, 19, you love God, you don't care for the world. What is your state? You're in a state of angst. And that angst was very well captured, according to me, by a Danish philosopher called Kierkegaard. He's a theistic, I beg your pardon, not atheistic. He's a theistic existentialist. And I liked logical positivism and existentialism, but I liked theistic existentialism as it spoke to my heart. And I picked Kierkegaard's topic of infinite resignation and leap of faith, something to that effect. And I wrote a nice proposal. Those days, no computers. I hand wrote it. I sent it to Anantapur town for a professional typist to type. The typist had the worst spellings ever. Every third word he misspelled. Then I sat with something called whiteout and I fixed it and I put it in a brown envelope and I gave it to Swami in person. Because that topic really spoke to me, taking that leap of faith and resigning infinitely to the will of God. So when I offered it to Swami, Swami said, "Ye kya hai?" I said, "Swami, mere thesis ka proposal." Swami looked at it, he took it. And a few days later, Professor Kasturi, the biographer of Swami, his daughter called me and she said, "Are you Karuna?" I said, "Yes." She said, "My dad asked me to hand you. Swami has gone through it and given it to you with blessings." I thought everything is going to be honky-dory because Swami blessed and I'm going to really ace and do very well. Contrary to my design, my mental plans, that PhD never happened because the university could not procure a single book from Denmark for me to do research. It was based on my very shallow understanding of Kierkegaard and his philosophy. Meanwhile, something told me I can't be just doing academic research on infinite resignation and surrender and faith. I have to internalize and practice it. And that's when I decided, okay, and in every interview, Swami said, do as your parents say, do as your parents say. So I said, I better listen to him for a change, right? So let me just go home and do what my parents say. So I said, okay, I think I'm done. This PhD is not going. And the other another sister, or like a girl, my classmate who was doing the same thing, she had to go to Pondicherry University to do because we were lacking academic resources at that time. The Satyasai Institute of Higher Learning was quite new and we didn't have such a flourishing library. There was no way on earth my mother would let me go to Pondicherry because Swami is where the buck stopped. She felt very safe in letting her daughter study with Swami, but nowhere else. So that's when I decided, okay, that's it. And a few months later, I got engaged and married. And I settled into a life in Delhi where my job was that of a journalist. And every job that I had, before my job, Swami would come and give me, in one particular case, he came in my dream and I told him I have a job interview for which I'm really ill prepared. He said, don't worry, I'm with you. You read about Punjab. That's all he said. And I said, about Punjab, Swami? He said, yeah. And gave me Pad Namaskar. That morning I woke up, I told my husband, Swami asked me to study about Punjab and I should, because in that time, in 1987, there was a lot of political turmoil in the state of Punjab. It's still simmering, but it was very active then. And they wanted a separatist state from the Union of India. So I went to my office, and in my office, as soon as I entered, I was working for a news magazine. There was a big, fresh copy of a news magazine called The Frontline. It's published by the Hindu Group. And the cover story said, Turmoil in Punjab. And there was a gun-trotting Khalistani on the front page, and there were inset boxes of all the key players involved in the Punjab controversy. So I thought, oh, this kind of speaks to what Swami said. I rolled it and I put it in my handbag. I went about my work. I went home. I read it one time front to back, then back to front. I got myself totally well prepared. And I went for this interview with only preparation on Punjab. But before I left, I made sure I wore a sari Bhagwan had given me for my convocation. And on the morning of my interview, Swami came in my dream and I saw the old priest of Puttaparthi offering arati to Bhagwan in the prayer hall. I remember that priest offering, and I'm singing in my dream, Narayan, Narayan. I woke up kind of chanting the arati. And I knew that Swami is with me. I felt very confident. I went for this interview and it was really very high profile. There was a panel and who's who from the Indian world of journalism was there. I was like the least qualified person. And whenever they made us wait, and every time somebody went for the interview before me, they would come back and everyone said, what did they ask you about? So they would tell about their topics. And I asked everyone, did they ask anything about Punjab? They said no. So they talked about the budget, India's refusal to sign the non-proliferation treaty for its nuclear development of its nuclear plants, the railway budget, India's relationship with Russia, NATO, non-alignment, everything. Everyone I asked anything on Punjab, they said none. Then I was like sweating and so worried. I actually went into the restroom and I saw myself, my cotton sari Swami gave was like a mopping cloth because I was so nervous. And the place was centrally air-conditioned, very fancy office called Mandi House on Copernicus Marg in Delhi. I will never forget that building. I'm shivering and I'm standing in the washroom and chanting Gayatri. And I'm telling myself, no, Swami will speak through me, Swami will salvage me. Then I thought, they have everyone's resume in front of them. If they read Sri Satyasai Institute of Higher Learning, and embarrassedly, I have written I'm a gold medalist, they will say, is this the kind of people they give gold medals to who doesn't know a word? I think I'll bring bad name to Swami and I should just leave. So if they call my name next, nobody will answer, so they'll go to the next candidate. And I remembered Arjuna wanting to run from the battlefield, and I became brave. And I said, no, I have my Sai Krishna with me. Let me be brave. Let me own up this moment and face it like a daredevil. Let's see what happens. So I took some deep breaths and I went inside. And as soon as I went, there was this panel of very distinguished people sitting. And they just sort of became very friendly with me. Oh, Mrs. Munshi, what do you work on? What's the last story you have edited? And this and that and everything. So we were just jibing. And then one of them, all the small talk ended. And then I was like, Swami, please be with me. Swami, save me. And then one gentleman said that, so let's say you get hired for this job. And we send you to Punjab to do a story on the situation in Punjab. How will you handle it? Instead of answering, I'm like smiling. Thank you, Swami. I know everything on Punjab because I read the whole magazine twice, right? So I'm answering. And then they say, who are all the key people you're going to interview? Remember those little guys on the inset box? I knew everyone's full name, last name, middle name, father's name, everything. I'm just rattling facts. I'm like an encyclopedia, unstoppable. And then when all this happened, so one of the distinguished gentlemen asked me, so you're proposing that you will interview all of them, including the man his name was Jarnail Singh, Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. He wanted a separatist state. He was the gun-trotting, blue kaftan wearing militant on the cover page. You're suggesting that on the national television, we give a voice and time to the biggest terrorist who wants to separate from the Indian Union. Can you imagine the number of sympathizers and popularity he will gain? Don't you think that will be against the interest of the nation? Now, none of this was on that Frontline magazine. I'm like, oh God, I didn't even think of it. Oh, Swami, what am I going to do? And then looking at me, and I kept nodding and smiling, pretending like, yeah, I get you, but I didn't. So I'm like, Swami, help me. And your time starts now. Speak through me, please. And suddenly, I was speaking. I know the first word that came out of my mouth was momentarily yes. That was the word that came out of my mouth. It's not my normal everyday vocabulary, okay? So I said yes. But you're underestimating the intelligence and the will of the Indian electorate and the people of India. If you think they will be swayed by just the voice of a man who wants to break their country only because you give him sound bites, 30 seconds on national television, then you haven't understood the mood of the nation. And I argued my case like a lawyer who'd been to 5 years of law school. I have no idea from where I got that kind of zeal and enthusiasm and logic, not mine. There was a power that had possessed me that was arguing with me, and all 4 or 5 gentlemen are nodding in approval and listening to me and looking at each other and so impressed. Obviously, they were impressed by Bhagwan speaking through me. None of it, I had never, as I was speaking, I was hearing myself and I was telling myself, that sounds great, keep going. It wasn't my own wisdom by any stretch of imagination. And when I finished, not to mention, I obviously I aced and I got the job and I did very well and I had great opportunities to interview and cover for the media. At that time, there was only one channel in India called Doordarshan, and I had opportunities to interact with and cover many newsmakers, many prime ministers, many visiting dignitaries, royalty, and so on. For me, it was just a learning curve for whatever Swami had in mind for me. And subsequently, I relocated to Canada, where I worked in the area of corporate communication. And I was working for a union of people who work for a crown corporation of the government of Ontario. And I did a lot of research, lot of communication work. And subsequently, I had a life-altering incident which made me realize that everything I have done so far and everything I'm pretending to do is just a shadow play. I need to get my act together. So around 2002, on a very dark, dismal, snowy day, my husband and I and my little son, who was 2 years old at that time, left from Toronto to go to Boston. There was a terrible, and my daughter and my sister stayed home in Toronto. We were driving to Boston a day prior to the arrival of a family member who was flying into Boston for the first time to take up a job in America. So my husband and I wanted to go and receive her and help her to settle down and then come back. We were caught in a terrible winter storm with great difficulty at about 2 a.m. There was no GPS and our phones died. We had mobile phones, the big ones, but it died. There was no charge. So we drove for a route that should have taken us 7-8 hours, took us like 16-18 hours. Eventually, early hours of the morning, we reached our friend's house. And next morning, when we realized, thank God, we're all safe and alive, my husband decided to go to Boston Airport, which was about an hour from where we were staying, hour and a half, to fetch his sister-in-law. And I was very happy with the baby because I was just catching my breath from the trauma of the previous night. Long story short, we thought my husband went to the airport. He really disappeared. And several hours, and he said, I'll go early because he loves to browse. He's like he used to be a big chronic, shopper, window shopper. So he said, I'll go to the airport, I'll have a great time, I'll have a coffee. But he never, we couldn't trace him. Meanwhile, several hours later, his sister-in-law arrived, looks for him, borrowed somebody else's phone, called me. She wasn't ready for the Boston winter. She was wearing like a fall jacket and all. She was freezing. She couldn't find him. We couldn't find him. I'm just compressing the story. There was so much of drama. It became very serious. After a man goes missing for 6-7 hours, we are calling the Ontario Provincial Police in Toronto to ask if, because our car had an Ontario license number, we're trying to figure out if they have any information of a missing car or an accident. We're calling the local police, the control room, can't find him. Even then, we could easily track a car. GPS existed. We couldn't find everything dead, phone switched off, person missing. He hasn't swiped his credit card. Now, this looked serious. On the one hand, the poor sister-in-law, she didn't even care that she has traveled for like 16-18 hours and there's nobody to receive her. She was worried what happened to him. I was worried what happened to him. And I went to the basement of this house. It was again Anantapur sister's house. I went to her basement where the altar was. I prayed to Swami. And I actually saw this. I've only read it on stuff that when you're dying, you see your whole life being played. I saw my life being played frame by frame by frame by frame. And I saw how many times Swami wanted me to love him and him alone. And how many times I had decided to love him from the periphery. Love him as a part-timer. I wanted to be in the world and with him, and I had really not taken that leap of faith and resigned infinitely to him. And I just prayed to Swami. I said, Swami, I can't deal with it. I have a 2-year-old blabbering with the soother. I have a daughter, 12-year-old at home in Toronto, his mother in Toronto, my sister in Toronto. I am in somebody else's house. There's 20 feet of snow outside. And there is a squall warning and a snowstorm warning, and this man is missing. You have to fix my life. You have to reverse time for me. Take it back to normalcy. I want everything to go back 8 hours in time. And then the question arose in my heart, on what basis, on what ground am I asking Swami to interfere with my destiny? Have I done what he always wanted me to do? And I realized I always did the bare minimum. I was Mr. Bare Minimum, Miss Bare Minimum. If my center had a budget, I was in charge of prasadam. Trust me, you'd get the best prasadam. I didn't do anything beyond that. If I was in charge of altar, best altar, but I didn't do more. I didn't own it. I didn't embrace Swami's work with everything I had. And that day, I had a conversation with Swami. And I said, Swami, if you can reverse my circumstances, fix my life. Everything you have given me and everything you have taught me, I will use it and use it only to serve you. If I can cross a T and dot an I will do it only for you. I will do nothing else. I will live you, breathe you, think you, eat you, sleep you, dream you. But you reverse the time and fix the chaos in my life. And I surrendered to him with that prayer. and the phone rang. And a very smart missing person had left his phone in the car, gone to the wrong terminal, and was blaming all of us for putting us through this. Now, I think many ladies can relate. And I do believe the entire drama was orchestrated by Swami to give me a strong knock on my head. And I have never looked back. Thankfully, with His grace, I have had enough clarity, because sometimes we dilly-dally and we say, okay, I'll do it, but I'll do it after I pay my mortgage, after I send my kid to college, after I do this. I just embraced the absurdity of that moment. I went back and called the principal of the Satya Sai school and I said, Uncle, any seva you have for me, I am ready to do. And that's how I was already on one of the committees of the school, but I started working full-time for the school, serving as the school secretary. And after that, I started working with Radio Sai, and then I moved to India and I worked with Radio Sai for another 9 years. And then I moved on to with Sri Satya Sai Vidya Vahini, where I serve currently. And through it all, my theme has been, in your love alone, am I all that I can be. Everything else that I tried to be in my life was a shadow self of mine. There is a very good example Bhagwan gives. He said, on a midday sun, if you imagine a beach in Kerala, God's own country, beautiful place, imagine there is a very scrawny, skinny man who's wearing his dhoti. He climbs this coconut tree with a big knife because he wants to chop that bunch of coconuts and make them drop. Now, because it's the midday sun, there is a shadow of that same coconut tree on the ground. While the real man is climbing the real coconut tree, the shadow man on the ground is also climbing the shadow coconut tree. The real man cuts the real bunch of coconuts which drop. The shadow man also strikes at that big bunch of luscious green coconuts and the shadow coconuts drop. Sometimes we live in this world and we chase the shadows and we imagine the shadow life to be the real life. Only when we experience the real, then we know the difference. For me, the difference has been just trusting Bhagwan and following him at every step in face of enormous challenges. I never shy away from talking about it, how challenging it is to be a person from a very different part of the country and the world, to be living in Puttaparthi, to be working in an environment on a full-time basis, dealing with people who are not used to having women with opinions around them. It's not easy. But what is? What is worthwhile that is easy in life? If you have Swami by your side, everything is easy. Everything is feasible, everything is possible. And every knock that you experience leads to your growth, leads to your strength, and your determination and your confidence in yourself. The only constant in my life has been Bhagwan. Since my childhood, he's the one I was searching for. He completes my life. He completes that circle. He joins all the dots. He makes me feel so loved, wanted, cared for, and satisfied. I have a purpose. Now, not everybody can possibly give up everything and move to Patni. That's a good thought. I highly recommend. You can consult me for some tips. But it's not that everybody needs to do that. We can all bloom wherever Swami plants us. And we can make a prashanti of wherever we are left to work. Every workplace can become a sacred workplace. Every home can become a prashanti nilayam if and only if we find that in His love alone, our heart is delighted. And in His love alone, our darkness, fear, anxiety, worries turn into light. Because if we love Him the way Swami loves us, unconditionally, we want to think thoughts that please Him, we want to speak words that please Him, and we want to perform actions that please Him. And we also want to know when to put the key away and observe silence when He wants us to. All of us have our answers within. We know what is right. There's something that holds us from taking that leap of faith and doing it sometimes. I think time in the Satyasai mission has come when all of us must embrace Swami and his call to duty, not because he needs us. If he could create the entire constellation and the universe by the power of a thought, he doesn't need you and me. He's giving us a chance to experience Godhood, the bliss, the gratification, the joy by serving him. Honestly, Swami doesn't need us. We need him. We need him desperately. And he's the one who gives light in our darkness and fills us with an experience we didn't even know existed. We only knew that what the senses can appease is what will measure my success. My bank balance, my good food, my nice clothes, my nice home, good music, good company. Actually, there's much more to it. But till we experience it, we don't know. So today, I urge all my sisters and brothers, love him. Love him like there is no tomorrow. Because there just might not be. Life is just like a bubble, very impermanent. The only permanence is our beloved Lord. Thank you so much, and Sai Ram.